While the Prime Minister and his caucus colleagues are enjoying taxpayer-funded drinks at the Lodge tonight, why don't we stick with the cost of living? We're told today that a record number of Australians can't even afford to pay their basic power bills. Remember this promise made by the PM before the election.
Reducing power prices by $275.
By 2025, $275 a year.
$275 a year.
We'll get power prices down by $275 a year.
Well, the reality is power bills are up more than 20% over the past 2 years, and 1.5% of Australians are on payment plans, struggling to pay their bills. This should not be happening in Australia. Energy expert Bruce Mountain is the director of the Victoria Energy Policy Centre and joins me now. It's pretty hollow when you look back at those promises made during the election campaign. I did note that Treasurer Chalmers said by 2025. Have you got any hope that you might see this week a new package that might bring some bill relief?
Hi, Steve. I don't know what the government's planning to do on energy subsidies or energy policy for households. I've heard it's been spoken about, but I'm afraid I have no insight as to what the government might be seeking to do on that.
So what's our expectation as we start 2024 on what the energy providers are going to do in regard to people who are struggling to pay the bills they already have? Where do they get relief? If you can't pay your electricity bill, I presume you get your power cut off.
There are a whole raft of processes and policies that the retailers are meant to follow on default and non-payment and putting in place payment plans and so on. So far, the data of the number of customers on those is still relatively small, but quite what is actually going on with many households doesn't necessarily show up in that data. But there are a whole raft of payment plans and processes that the retailers are meant to follow in seeking payment for electricity and gas bills. What could the government do beyond just a one-off payment to ease bill pressure? What else? What could they do long term, do you believe, to try and bring down the increases that we've seen over the last 2 years? So there's a bunch of usual things to say: make markets more competitive, agitate for retailers to more effectively pass on wholesale price changes. Electricity distribution and transmission networks in Australia by global standards are extraordinarily expensive, and a whole lot of that has got to do with asset valuation. And then I think executing the transition to cleaner energies, which at the moment are cheaper than coal and gas, will be part of the picture. Making markets work more effectively in the customer's interest is a stock standard response. Governments have been speaking about that and pursuing it in different ways with different level of vigour over the years. I'm kind of wary about whatever claims they might make on that. I'm afraid at this stage, an enduring way to get better bills for customers, an easy thing to do, is to put the burden on the taxpayer. That'll bring lower bills for electricity customers, but it shifts revenue recovery onto taxpayers. So other than that, it's hard yards making markets work more effectively for customers.
Bruce, we seem to be living in some sort of parallel universe here. I know Chris Bowen, the Minister, 2 days ago was out there blowing his trumpet about the fact that the gas reserve bill that they put through so that gas companies would keep more gas back on shore in Australia for use by Australian consumers. And yet you and I live in a state in Victoria where gas is a dirty word, and we're being told that if your gas hot water service or your gas oven breaks down, you're not going to be able to replace it with gas. How do those two things marry up?
Yeah, the main story on gas, at least in the south and eastern states, is when you add together the international demand for LNG that we ship out through Queensland to the east and southern states' gas demand for heating and industry and cooking and so on, When you add that together, we do not have enough supply. And so incredibly high prices are sustained. There's been a great level of concern about the concentration in gas supply and in gas shipping. But the dominant factor by far is relative to the demand, there's a scarcity. And reconciling that is incredibly difficult. You either need to decrease international exports, which means international buyers who put a great deal of trust in long-term suppliers from us will put our governments under a great deal of pressure to secure their supplies, which they've done, or local customers need to pay more. Unless you decrease demand for gas and move from gas to electricity, and that way free up supply. So that's the fundamental sort of key market issue. Under that, there's a great deal, again, of getting markets to work more effectively for the end customer. And all of that's hard to do, but it's kind of hard to do at the best of times. When you're doing it in the context of a scarcity of gas supply, it's difficult.